Hello everyone, thank you for joining us at this Your Overseas Home webinar. My name is Abby Young and I'm an account manager here at Your Overseas Home. Today we will be chatting with Ian Skinner from Chase Buchanan Wealth Management about your financial considerations when moving to Portugal. It's great to have so many of you with us today, whether you're watching live or on demand. Once Ian has shared his presentation, we will be opening up the floor to any questions. So if you have any as we go along, please type them in the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen. We hope to answer as many queries as we can today, but if we don't get round to them all, please don't worry. Any unanswered questions will be forwarded to Ian and the team at Chase Buchanan. Before you start your presentation, Ian, please can you introduce what you do and what Chase Buchanan does as well?
Yeah, so thanks, Abby. Hi, guys. So my name's Ian Skinner. I'm one of the private wealth managers at Chase Buchanan. I'm based in the Portugal team. And so I actually joined Chase Buchanan a couple of years ago, and I came across from Singapore with my wife and 3 children. The parents started to get older in the UK, so it was time for me, come closer to home. Although UK wasn't really an option for me, I wanted to be in the warm weather still. So yeah, Portugal's been great so far. So hopefully today I can clear up any queries you might have and some concerns. And of course, yeah, I love questions, so please do ask them rather than me just talking at a screen for 10, 15 minutes. So yeah, that's me, and I think we can get into it about moving to Portugal and some tax planning and some financial advice.
Perfect. Yeah, it'll be great to see your presentation, and then we'll get to some questions at the end.
Brilliant. Thanks, Abby. Oh yeah, it's enlarged now. So I'm not sure if you've heard of Chase Buchanan before, and I'm gathering people on this call, varying stages of moving to Portugal. So, well, you're thinking about it, you may have started last year, you just want to clear up a few things. So yeah, here we are. So Chase Buchanan, so originally, we're a private wealth management firm, originally based in the UK and regulated under the FCA. And of course, I'm sure a lot of you will remember the votes back in 2016, the Brexit vote. That's had varying issues for financial companies. It was with the passporting rights. So generally in UK, previously, before Brexit, you could passport into the EU, help clients with, their financial assets, etc. Since the changes, we had to make a decision: do we stay UK regulated or EU regulated? And the fact that we had so many clients on continental Europe was an easy decision for us to go EU. So essentially what that means is we have what's called a MiFID license. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but it's Markets in Financial Instruments Directives. So essentially that's the most comprehensive license you can have in the EU to provide wealth management and tax planning solutions. So who we are, again, private wealth management, but when we talk about private wealth management, what is that and what does it entail? Of course, there's a whole array of services that we provide. So of course, there's investment management, helping clients grow their wealth, protect their assets, the financial planning involved in that, so retirement, cash flow analysis. And then when you talk about private wealth, it includes the tax planning as well. So, when I lived in Singapore, tax wasn't really an issue for most of my clients because there really wasn't any. And of course, now in Europe, it's a bit of a minefield when it comes to taxes. You'd think, the countries might be the same. That's not the case. So of course, tax planning seems to take priority now for our clients that are, leaving the UK, Ireland, US, wherever that may be. So tax planning's there. So yeah, the services are vast. What's not included in here actually is estate and domicile planning. So it's definitely, if you're coming from Ireland or the UK, it's very hard to lose your domicile. But there might be some changes next year for the UK, more to follow on that. But of course, there could be some ways to also make Portugal your domicile of choice. So quite a complex area, but we're trying to simplify that for you. So yeah, just please get in touch if you have any queries around that. So in terms of offices, as I mentioned, we are licensed in the EU. We also have Canada and the US under the SEC. So with that, we can passport across Europe and internationally. Of course, I'm here in the Portugal office, which is what we're here for today. So anything Portugal, any questions, just let me know. So the tax essentials, as I mentioned, very important part for people on this call today. So we sort of touched on the golden visa and the changes. Obviously, the hot topic at the moment is non-habitual residency and the changes there. And then we also look at, some taxes that might involve you with your financial assets overseas once you get to Portugal. The tax planning and financial planning that goes with that. So when we talk about tax residency in Portugal, of course, if you're leaving the UK or Ireland, there needs to be a transitional phase where you might remain tax resident in these countries until you make Portugal your tax residency. But generally, the black and white rule here is if you spend 183 days in Portugal, your tax residency will be here. There is also some areas around your economic centre of interest. So having your main residence in Portugal, where are your assets based? Essentially, though, when you get the residency in Portugal, you're free to travel around the Schengen zone. You don't have to worry about the 90 days in every 180 if you're coming from a non-EU country. So golden visa, lots of changes here over the last 2 years. So originally you used to be able to buy a property for personal use and get the golden visa. That sort of got stopped. Then it went to commercial property. That's been stopped. Essentially, to get the golden visa now, you need to invest $500,000 into specific investments in Portugal, or you can make a donation of $1 million. So yeah, it's quite restrictive now, but it's certainly an option that we can discuss as well. So yeah, like I said, the hot topic, non-habitual residency, taking up a lot of my time over the last 6 months, which has been great because we have been helping people still get on the old scheme. So if there's any of you on this call, that made any attempts whatsoever to become resident in Portugal last year, please do speak to us because there could be an opportunity here for you, especially if you already had property here in Portugal as well. They are looking at a NHR Volume 2, but this will be more directed towards working professionals and startups and very specific job roles and titles. We're still waiting for more updates from the government on this. So again, if you get in touch, we can keep you updated with this as well. At the moment, we're still trying to, Portugal's still trying to form a government. So there are talks of extending the NHR scheme anyway on the old rules. So yeah, please do get in touch if you have any queries here. Saying that, it's very tax efficient, but there are ways, even without NHR, depending on your worldwide assets, whether that's pensions, investments, you can make this extremely tax efficient regardless. I guess with the NHR, the main benefit was if you had foreign rental income. And of course, a lot of clients do. So yeah, again, speak to us, please, if you have any questions. So in terms of capital gains tax, so there'd be a lot of people in this call, I assume, that might have ISAs in the UK, you might have stock portfolios overseas. I have clients with assets all over the world and they're moving to Portugal. So when you get to Portugal, you've got to think Portuguese. So if you do want to realise these assets at some point, there is going to be a 28% capital gains tax on the gains since the start of that asset. So for example, some people have built up ISAs over 20 years, could have a lot of gains there. That could become taxable in Portugal when it's not in the UK. So yeah, again, when you're coming in that transitional phase, moving to Portugal, there's ways to structure these assets, so they become Portuguese compliant before you become tax resident. And then you're starting, at a full capital level. And generally in Portugal, any capital, any money you've saved personally will always remain tax-free. It's just on the gains when you withdraw where there may be an issue. In terms of inheritance tax, there is none in Portugal. So if you are passing on assets to direct descendants and descendants, there won't be any inheritance tax. The issue you might find, which I touched on earlier, is around domicile. So if you're leaving the UK and Ireland, it's very hard to get rid of your domicile. So potentially your worldwide assets will be subject to inheritance tax. And there's some very specific steps we can take to, minimise or mitigate this issue for you. So, yep, staying on the tax planning, as I said, you've got to think Portuguese. If you've got UK or Irish pensions, and you've got those tax-free lump sums, I would suggest you take those before you become resident here, otherwise it will become taxable. And then there's ways to structure your pension assets anyway, so they can be tax efficient indefinitely in Portugal, regardless of NHR. In terms of UK ISAs, I said earlier, they become taxable here, and same with stocks and shares. Essentially, any foreign investments that have capital gains, you may have to pay it without proper planning beforehand. So financial planning, for those of you with foreign property, so of course, under most double taxation agreements, the source country has the initial taxation right, so where the property is based. So if, for example, you're in the UK, you're renting out a property and you're in Portugal, you'll still benefit from the tax-free allowance each year. And of course, then you'll pay taxes in the UK over and above that in rented income. And then if there is a difference to pay, which is 25% in Portugal, you'll pay the other slice here. So in total, you'll pay 25%, and the UK tax already paid will be offset here. If you've got Irish pensions, I would consider before you purchase an approved retirement fund, speak to us as well. The issues there is with an approved retirement fund, R for short, and that will be taxed at source in Ireland and then taxed again in Portugal at marginal rates. So yeah, certainly talk to us there. State pensions in the UK will be paid to you as normal and won't be taxed in the UK. They will be taxed in Portugal. What I would add here is if you have government pensions, such as NHS, military, police, this will always be taxed in the source country under the double taxation agreements. So this could be quite good planning if those are sort of pensions you have, because you can minimise your tax in the UK or Ireland on these, and then of course just pay tax in Portugal on your state pensions, for example. So trusted advice made simple. So of course there's 1,000,001 things to do when you're moving to Portugal, and of course your overseas homes has you covered from A to Z, whether that's visas, property, etc. And of course, when we come to what might seem complicated, we do try to keep it simple for you. We can build a detailed plan and timeline for before, during, and after Portugal, and of course when you're passing on assets to your loved ones, and essentially make your life as tax efficient as possible, and of course maximising that income through retirement or whatever you're doing coming to Portugal. If you're coming here to work, there is also corporate structuring we can discuss as well. So yeah, this is me. Always happy to have a no obligation meeting, and just at any time, just any questions at all, just let me know. If you're technologically advanced more than me, there is a QR code here. So if you'd like to take out your phone, you can actually go directly to my calendar and book an appointment, or please do write down the numbers here. That's my Portugal number, and below is my WhatsApp with the +44. And yeah, that's the end of the presentation. So hopefully there's a lot of questions for me, and I believe there might be 20. So excellent.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much, Ian. All your tips and advice were very insightful there. There have been some really great questions in the chat for you. So we'll run through a lot of those now. I will say, looking at them, I think everyone should definitely try and book in a meeting with Ian. It looks like there's some really detailed conversations that everyone's looking to have. But I'll start off. We've had a few questions from Alex with regards to tax over in Portugal. His first question asks, how do you actually manage the different financial year timings? Can you give any guidance on that side of things today?
Yeah, I can actually. So I believe Alex is referring to the sort of split years. I mean, if you're coming from the UK, it's April to April, the tax year. In Portugal, it's January to December. So generally, in an ideal situation, if you move to Portugal after July, you might not spend 183 days in Portugal this year. But then there needs to be a conversation, is there going to be a new primary residence here as well? Because then there's a question of, does your tax residency start from that date, or will it start the following year, the January following? So certainly, yeah, we can have a conversation around that as well. And we call it split years here, and there's certainly some planning to be done. Also, if you're coming from the UK as well, it's about the clean break. So we can do a ties test in the UK. There's various ties: work ties, property tie, 90-day tie, family tie. And this will sort of dictate how many days you can go back to the UK each year without being tax resident in both UK and Portugal. So there's certainly some work to do around the clean break as well.
Perfect. Alex also asks, how does IHT work?
Right, so IHT in the UK, very, very difficult to lose your UK domicile. It's essentially there's some very specific steps you need to take to sever all ties with the UK, which, in most cases is quite difficult for people to do. Going as far as, being a member, being on the voting register, having a property, having a bank account. All of these are ties to the UK. Having a UK pension in the UK is another one. So essentially, there's just steps you can take to either go down the route of, just do some simple transactions to take assets out of your estate for inheritance tax purposes, because your worldwide assets will come under this scope. Or there are steps you can take to make Portugal your domicile of choice and do a will with some specific statements. But yeah, we can certainly help there. And that's probably the main area I'm helping with at the moment is IHT mitigation.
Okay, perfect. Believe it or not, Alex actually has another question.
Brilliant.
I think the first bunch are going to be mostly from Alex, who's asking some really key questions here.
Absolutely.
His next one is surrounding how long is residency in Portugal before you're liable for tax residency?
Right, yeah. So, this is where it gets confusing actually, because there's residency, tax residency, and domicile again. So your residency starts, in the UK actually. You have to do your VFS appointment. I've actually been through this process myself recently, so I'm quite good to speak to about this. So then you'll get your 4-month visa stamp. You come to Portugal. There's various steps you need to take, either buy a property, have a long-term rental agreement. So your tax residency, it's difficult to say. And of course, we have the tax advisors we can speak to as well. It's taken a while for us to get these partners. When does your tax residency actually start? We'd have to have a conversation because it depends when you move.
Okay, perfect. Alex also asked, I know you touched very briefly on it, but he's asking, how do you avoid the double taxation side of things? I know you mentioned about the double taxation treaty. Could you just kind of clarify a little bit more on that side of things?
Yeah, essentially that would be making the clean break from the UK. So making, if you're moving to Portugal, make Portugal your tax residency. Don't fall foul of UK rules. The HMRC has long tentacles, and it's quite hard to get away from them unless you take the correct steps. So again, we can, provide, the advice, because we do have a UK tax consultancy team in house, and the guy that runs that used to work for HMRC as well. So, good guy to have on board. So it doesn't get better than that, and making sure you're not taxed twice. And of course, there's lots of taxes you can offset as well against Portugal. So.
Yeah, brilliant. Pauline has asked a specific question about her own situation. So I would definitely recommend Pauline in general setting up a meeting with Ian. But what she's asking today is, would we be liable for capital gains tax on the sale of our only £135,000 UK residential property that they've had for 6 years? They are a 65 and 64-year-old couple. Can you give some information with regards to how the capital gains tax would work?
Yeah, of course. So if that's in the UK as well, and currently your primary residence, so if you're actually living in that property now and you sell that property, there is no capital gains tax in the UK. What we could also do, if it's an investment property, there could potentially be capital gains tax on the sale of that property. But what we can do is send you like a CGT capital gains tax calculator. And then once you get to the end of that on the government website, you've got 3 choices of tax to pay, and it will be based on how many days have you lived in there, how long have you had the property. So yeah, of course, we can certainly help, clear that up for you.
Brilliant. Alex again has another question. I believe this is in regards to the golden visa slide that you had up, referencing the investment of £500,000. He's asking, with that investment, do they pay out dividends or returns? Can you give some kind of information on that side of things?
Yeah, so we don't deal directly with the funds themselves. They have to be Portugal approved, and they're very specific, but there are some good funds in there in terms of renewable energy. So, that's quite big for some people around the environmental, social and governmental. What you will find with these investments is they have quite a long maturity date. So they do have an expected return. and expected payouts, but they sort of have to be locked away for sometimes 6 to 10 years, and at the end of that you'll have a 10% capital gains tax as well. So for me, me personally as well, I'd rather just go down the usual visa route. It's not too difficult to do. It's applicable to most people, and that way you have more control over your own investments rather than sort of going down the investment with the golden visa where you're not quite sure what that entails, if you like. So that would be my advice there.
Yeah, definitely. I think Portugal has probably one of the best non-golden visa kind of options. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a good option. Frank is asking, he's a Canadian, but he does have European citizenship
Mm-hmm.
and an Italian passport. So he's wondering, can he settle in Portugal without issues just by renting an apartment?
Yeah, if you've got an Italian passport, you just come to Portugal and go down your local town hall and sign up. So it's very simple actually. I had a client to get on the NHR last year. He came from Sweden. He flew down to Portugal and had everything done in 7 days. So
Wow.
it's just a bit more difficult if you've got a British passport or US, or if you only had your Canadian passport and not the Italian. So yeah, very simple to do, and come to Portugal. Absolutely.
Perfect. We have a question here from Anna asking, what would the sales tax be when selling a property in Portugal? Is that something you could cover?
Yes. So generally, the sales tax, if you're talking about capital gains tax, it would be 28% in Portugal on the sale of a property. Sales tax, again, that would be one for your overseas homes and the real estate experts here. So I'm more around the tax planning and on the investment and pension side. When it comes to real estate, your overseas homes has you covered, of course. So.
Yeah, definitely. Anna, we'll pass on your details to one of our property consultants who will be able to connect you with someone who can give you some more information on that.
Excellent.
Perfect. We have quite a few questions actually.
Brilliant.
We have another one here from Matthew with regards to his UK state pension. So if he was living in Portugal, would he get his pension paid gross, and what would he pay to Portugal?
Right. So yes, you would get your pension paid gross, and it's up to you where that gets paid. It doesn't have to be to a Portugal bank. So it can be paid into a UK bank. You've just got to report it in Portugal. So, without the NHR system, it will just be taxed at marginal rates. So, and that will depend on your other income streams as well. So, rather in the UK where everything's sort of grouped together, in Portugal, everything's taxed separately in their own categories. So you'll have pension income here, investment income, rented income, employment income, capital gains. All of these categories are taxed separately. So with some careful planning, you can sort of spread your assets across the whole lot of those, and make yourself tax efficient as well. And you can also do joint reporting if you have a spouse as well, or a cohabiting spouse. Don't necessarily have to be married either. And then you can, if one spouse is earning more than the other, you can sort of bring down the brackets as well. So lots of planning to do there.
Perfect. I think we have a question here from Wayne, which is definitely in a similar vein. So I think you may have kind of answered it here, but we'll just cover it again just to make sure. So Wayne's asking, if you have an employee pension, which you are drawing down, is that taxed in Portugal?
Yes. So this also depends on the type of pension as well. So if it's sort of like the old style UK pensions that are final salary, or what's also known as defined benefit. So essentially you work and you get a fixed annuity upon retirement. Again, that can be taxed. That will be taxed at marginal rates. If you can restructure those pensions into a personal pension, then there's ways to make that extremely tax efficient as well, indefinitely in Portugal and regardless of NHR. So this is quite specific as well on the type of pension, and there's many pensions out there. So we'd have to look at that individually.
Yeah,
on a case-by-case basis, essentially.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure if this is kind of your field of expertise here, but Anna is asking, what are the annual taxes on property in Portugal? Can you kind of give us some insight into that?
Yes, so it's a very complex one. You've got IMI, so it's based on meterage of the property in Portugal. It's not based on the purchase price. It's also based on what Portugal considers the construction price. I think it's around €630, and it can be a tax of 0.3 to 0.45% depending on the area your property is based. But again, it's definitely not my areas of expertise, and I was actually researching this myself yesterday. So, but again, that would be one for the property experts on property taxes and the ongoing costs of owning a property here in Portugal. But it would be similar to council tax in the UK, hopefully a bit less.
I think it is a bit less from what I've heard. So, Martin is asking, do you think the pension visa and the D7 scheme will continue under the new government?
Absolutely. I don't think there's going to be any changes to the visa process and to become resident here. They're just trying to make changes to who can benefit from the NHR in the Volume 2. So as far as I'm aware, it's business as usual in terms of visas and moving here.
Perfect. Jared asks, my question regards the triple lock protection of the UK state pension. Is that maintained when you live in Portugal?
So interesting question, because when I was living overseas in Asia, some of my friends were quite worried about this. As far as I'm aware, it stays. You're still protected. You're in the EU. So let me get back to you on that, because I would need to talk to our tax team in the UK about this.
Perfect. Probably sensible to set up a meeting with you in a few days then and kind of get all that answered. Perfect. And then we have time for a question from Frank, which I think you'll probably be able to give an answer to. But Frank, I would also recommend we'll get you in touch with one of our property consultants to go through this in a bit more detail. But he was the gentleman from Canada with the Italian passport. He's asking, will he also have access to the healthcare system when he moves, and what will he need to do to gain access? Is there anything you can kind of give us on that?
Yes, of course. So I'm going through this myself, actually. So you come to Portugal and you don't need to get a residency visa like me, but you come to Portugal and sign up, and then you get what's called an S&S number. So essentially, this is free healthcare. Exactly, I'm not sure how Canada works, but in the UK it would be like the NHS. So yeah, you can certainly get the free healthcare. You might also have to apply for a social security number as well once you get here. But if you're retired, hopefully not paying social security, because it can be quite painful if you're working in Portugal.
Perfect. Well, that was very, very helpful, Ian. I think that's pretty much all we're going to have time for. But if anybody does have any questions that they think of after the session, definitely get in touch with Ian, and he'll always be more than happy to help them out. Thank you again, Ian, for sharing all of your knowledge. It's been really helpful, and thank you to all of our listeners for joining us. As mentioned, we do strongly recommend that you get in touch with Chase Buchanan directly just to discuss your requirements in more detail. We'll be in touch with their details shortly. But before we finish, I'd like to invite you just to leave us a review on Trustpilot if you did find this webinar helpful. Thanks again, everybody, and happy property hunting.
Thank you, Abby.
Thanks.
See you guys. Bye.